Hi, everyone. Welcome to Turning Everything to Gold podcast with Zenzi and Luna. We have a unique experience today that we're going to talk about. And the podcast is going to really wrap around spirituality, entities, demonic forces. And what Luna and I were discussing is watching a lot of YouTubers and podcasters. It seems like a lot of people are talking about
Mhm.
this experience. They're talking about, religion, and by hearing so many things about spiritual issues, spiritual entities, demonic forces. Have you noticed anything like that? I know you were saying you've seen it too. Like big people that I don't
It's
know.
everywhere.
Yeah, it feels like it's becoming more mainstream and people are talking. I
Mhm.
see a lot of people interviewing priests and how do you do demonic clearing and deliverance work and things like this. And I don't know, it just seems like it's becoming more mainstream.
And what exactly is it? How does it show up to in your life? Like, I think a lot of people have been maybe not so aware for so long and have just allowed some of these entities or dark energy in. And when they do have an awakening, they're like, whoa, like this is not, and are realizing, are waking up to it and being like, something's off here. So I just have like only because you have more experience with this than I do. I have questions that I wrote because I feel like,
Okay.
yeah.
I'm
So,
I'm I'm excited. I'm excited because it's not something that in the work that I do and in the work and I you and I have trained, we worked with the rich healing that I teach, and it's
mhm,
always based on the body, mind, and spirit, because sometimes when you're going into energy healing or clearing, it's not, as you know, it's not energy. It's actually spiritual. And so I feel as teaching people this type of work, you've got to teach them the spiritual side as well, because otherwise it could affect you as a healer, is doing this work and assisting people on their own journey. If you don't know what's coming up, it can really wreak havoc, not just for yourself but also for your client. So
right.
I feel like it's part of what needs to be taught when you're working as an energy healer. Super important.
Yeah, 100%. So for people who've never thought about this before, like are not aware, how would you define demonic or dark energy? How would that show up or present itself? In what kind of ways would you see that?
It can show up in many different ways, as we're all different and how we process energy. It can show up as ruminating thoughts. It can show up as depression. It can show up as oppression. It can show up as addiction. Um, it can have voices or thoughts in the head that are, I was talking about the ruminating thoughts, but it can create a feeling that you need to do something that you shouldn't be doing. It can keep
Hmm.
it's really big with keeping people down in dark confusion, because if it's from God, it's from above, it's light, there's not going to be confusion. So when people are like, especially even in toxic relationships, like sometimes soul ties, I wouldn't say demonic, but you can have an oppression or a creative or a dark energy, not creative, but a dark energy that comes in to lock people into a space that is extremely toxic. It can be manipulation. A big form of witchcraft is gossip, because it is manipulation of people's minds
Hmm.
for your agenda. So it can come in so many different ways. People think, oh, I'm just talking about someone else. But if you have the truth of what the situation is and you're trying to manipulate someone's mind and thought in the directions they want to go, gossip can also be forms of darkness, witchcraft, all different things like this. And when I say that, it's this is where dark entities can come in. So it's manipulation, confusion in the mind, and people can do that out of jealousy, envy. It can show up in so many different ways. It's very hard to pin down, but people can also have open doors to allow this kind of stuff to come in, whether knowing or unknowing, meaning
Right.
I'm doing this intentionally because I know what I'm doing. I have a lot of people say, well, this brings a lot of power to me, so I feel really good. They know, they might not attach it to demonic forces, but they know it feels they have more control or more power. But eventually that will take over, and they will be that energy, that spirit will be lost. You'll be completely oppressed and you'll be taken over by something else. There's so many different forms of spiritual entities, attacks, demonic forces, things like this.
I think that's interesting what you said about gossip because I don't think a lot of people realize when you're doing stuff like gossiping. I certainly, being that I'm in the restaurant industry, for my day job, that is so normal to like talk about other people. And it's like, yeah, I guess I just never
People,
really realized.
you wouldn't, you maybe might not think of it like that, but it is like trying to think about it. Our words are the most powerful form of
Hmm.
vibrational energy we have. It says in the Bible, we have the power of life and death in our tongue. It's for
Yeah,
good or bad. So what I'm saying can be for good or bad. But if you know in your heart a situation is a certain way, and then you go and talk about someone else knowing what the situation is, that you're trying to manipulate their thoughts or mind to be on your side or something like this,
right.
you're manipulating through spells, words are spoken. You're manipulating the mind, the situation, and the energy. That might be like, oh no, we're just talking about somebody. No, that's a form of manipulation, and manipulation is darkness where things can come in.
Wow. When in your life, I mean, if you can even remember, do you remember being aware of things like dark energy or demonic? I would say maybe more in your career because, well, maybe in your life, maybe you knew at a young age. I would say for me, and now that you're talking about gossip, is every Monday, every other Monday, my mother used to have her friends over, and they were friends from high school, and one of them was her cousin. She would have these women over. It's very interesting because I'm thinking about it right now. And they would sit around and they would talk about the people that were not there and things that were going on in their lives that maybe we shouldn't be having these conversations, because it's very hurtful. And I'm just thinking about how sad that is and how I don't know if it was to make themselves feel better or I just feel like in my life this has been a reoccurring theme, specifically in um, the form of gossip that goes back to when I was like 3 or 4. Because I remember these women coming over and they used to call it coffee. My mom would say, "Oh, we're having coffee at our house tonight," or "Oh, I'm going to coffee." And she didn't even drink coffee. And she was like, "No." And that's what they would do. They would just sit around and just say terrible things about other people
Well,
that
I
were
think
in
what
town.
is such it's interesting because I think this is going to flare a lot of people. I really do.
Yeah.
Because um, even religious or Christian people can have spiritual
Oh,
entities,
yeah.
demonic forces coming in. So I just want to say that if you're not going to say something to someone's face because it would be inappropriate or rude or hateful, I would never say that in front of them, then you shouldn't be saying it at all because you
Well,
know that it's not right. And if you're going to sit around and talk about other people for whatever the reason is,
yeah.
then there's something going on within yourself that is you're not you're focusing. There's I don't know the exact quote in the Bible, but it's like you need to clean out your own eye, remove
Mhm.
the twig or log from your own eye before you start pointing at other people. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done internally. But when you do this, and this is so interesting, we're talking about this today because just yesterday I do intuitive daily downloads, and
Mhm.
yesterday what came in, or the day before it came in, was um, be careful even when you're in a situation, you're in a relationship with somebody, your spouse, partner, whoever, friendship, and it might be going really bad and you're arguing and there's some anger or some things going on, but maybe it's not said because you're taking a break from arguing or talking, but internally you're like, you're being such a what are you calling this person in your mind? Why are you acting this way? I think you should just leave. You're thinking stuff in your mind. It might not be verbalized through the power of the voice, but you're taking an energetic punch at that person and
Right.
taking the situation down. And even though it might not be said outside, if you could switch that to prayer and uplifting and start praying for the person and whatever they're going through and this spirit of confusion that is coming in, this heaviness or the spirit of division or whatever it is that's coming in, and you start doing that, the situation will begin to rise. But it
Mhm.
is like energetically, you're not helping yourself or that person, even if things aren't said out loud. It's tricky, but our words are so powerful. So think about sitting around in a group just talking about things, and it's, if it's not something that you would say and do in front of someone else, then you shouldn't be saying it at all. You shouldn't be saying
Well,
it at all.
I totally agree with you. And usually, if I'm saying something about somebody else, I'll be like, no, I would say this to their face. I usually wouldn't. But I can remember growing up and having my mother and other adults in our lives say, if you can't say something nice about people, don't say anything at all, right?
Yeah,
That's what we were taught. That's not
100%.
what we were shown, though, because I
Oh,
can remember, and even like family gatherings, we're talking about other family members who aren't here. And I just like that just really hit me that I was like, oh, okay. I really get that now.
well, I want to say this too. Sometimes talking about people, it's a normal, like if we're talking about life or talking about things going on. So there's a little bit of a separation from we're sharing the experience or there's concern about this person. It's
Right.
different from we're downing this person, we're talking negatively about this person. I feel this way about him. How do you feel? So it's like
Yeah.
it's a gang up type of energy and trying to get people on your side, which can
Odd.
all kinds of this is where the manipulation comes in through the words. So gossip can be very toxic. And if you do read the Bible, there is words in the Bible that says, do not do not gossip because you're slandering, don't slander other people. Don't there's a reason why, and it's connected to the manipulation of the mind, the energy that it brings in. We do a lot of energy work too, right? And so that's where I was saying what came in yesterday for the downloads of information was, be careful what you're saying, even in your heart and under your breath, because it's affecting you. And then it's
Yeah.
also still affecting them in the energy undercurrent there. So
Yeah.
that is a really big form where darkness can come in. It's like an open door. When you open the door, then all kinds of things can come in, but that's a huge form of it.
Wow. Okay, so let's talk about personal experiences and what in work not well, I mean, if you have them in your life, which I know you do, but maybe more so when you're working with clients, dark energy and how that presents itself and how you respond to that. Because for me, when we were doing the rich um
Training.
course,
Mhm.
right? That was probably about a year ago. I I guess I had never experienced it like in person, and there was an experience of it in that weekend that we were training, and then one other time in class
Mhm.
that I was like, "Whoa, what is this?" And the response was from you was like, "Just start praying, everyone, start praying." And we're like, "Okay, we don't know. We could you could kind of hear something going on over here, like what's happening?" And it got a little crazy. But like, can you give us a couple of experiences that you've had
Mhm.
so that we can understand it like a little bit better?
So, not really when I was growing up did things happen, trauma happened, things of people getting physical and violent and things like that. Never really associated with spiritual kind of things when I was young. It
Mhm.
didn't really connect it that way. It actually did start when I was doing my work to where I was training with someone and she said, she was like you need to pray for protection before you work with someone, especially
Mhm.
anybody, everybody. And I had a different view. And so we kind of went back and forth until basically God put me in my place and said, that's absolutely right. You need to follow suit. And then so I learned through everything that I teach is what I've learned through experience of doing this for as long as I have. And
Mhm.
so for example, a session that came up yesterday, actually, working with a new client on Zoom. They're in another country, and we're working. And as soon as I get on, I always do my prayer, my protection, and then we get on the call. And as we're getting on the call, Sometimes darkness manifests physically, and sometimes it's spiritually, and I can feel it in the energy. So it depends on the situation. For example, the session yesterday. Um, when we started talking, he would do something with his face. And I said, I didn't say anything, but internally, I was like, okay, this is not going to be an energy clearing. This is going to be a spiritual session. So get
Mhm.
prepared. And I'm like in my mind, and I'm like, okay, it's the first time I've met this individual. And after a little bit, he was explaining that he's dealing with anger, and it's kind of, it feels good, but it's not healthy. So we started saying words. I said, okay, so I'm making the connection. I said, so, and I just started asking him questions, and we started going down the line. I said, so tell me, I was shown some things that happened when he was 6. And I said, tell me a little bit of the childhood. And he said, well, I don't really remember from the age of like 5 till or 6 until, um, 12. I don't really have any memory of it. And so, anyway, we started going through the session. And then, after a little bit and talking to him, and I said, can I ask you a question? He goes, yeah. And I said, what are you doing with your face? Are you aware what you're doing with your face? And he said, he goes, yes, but sometimes when I feel this anger come in, my face just does this. And I said, okay, do you have control of your face right now? And he said, no, it just does that. And I said, okay, so I want to ask you a couple questions. And then I went through and I started asking him about certain things that I do for clearings. Um,
Mhm.
I used to call it deliverance, but I call it spiritual purification now, a little bit of a different
Okay.
word because I'm not doing it so much in a religious way, but in a way that I do. It's just a little bit different. But anyway, um, so I had to go through some things with him. It manifested itself in physical form where I could physically see it. And we talked about it. I asked some questions. Told him I was going to do a spiritual type of session, asked him if he was okay with this, told him some things to expect. And it was a very intense 75 minutes. And
I believe it.
remember, just like when we're doing energy clearing, everything comes in layers. And sometimes this type of work takes multiple sessions. But I do want to say sometimes that particular just came up the other day, is why I'm sharing it. I can see it physically. Um,
Mhm.
for example, as well in the training course, which we talked a little bit about before, it was the best experience in teaching that I could have had for
Yeah.
students in class. It was like, I'm not going like yes, but at the same time, I'm like, thank you, because
Yes.
you need to, you hear what I'm saying, but to physically experience it is a whole nother level. And in all classes, no, that won't be. But the people, excuse me, the people that are meant to teach that work are meant to see this. They need to see this because not everybody, we're called to do this, but not everybody is prepared or knows what to
Prepared.
do to be able to do this type of work. And you really need to. Otherwise, you could create issues for yourself or your client, which you don't want. And so that was fabulous experience.
Mhm.
And everybody in the class handled it fantastic and the best way that it could have handled and still was able to stay on point with everything that I taught. That shows, that you're going to succeed at this. And remember, some people, when this comes up, it's like, do I work on this now? And you need to have the knowledge, no, this is not something I deal with now. And so going back to the class where this manifested in class, because it manifested this way, I typically set up class energetically, spiritually, where I'm covered, the place is covered, everybody is safe. So if something happens, no one is going to be affected by this energy, which is very important. I feel like from any teacher, yes.
And I do want to say, like, that I, at no point in time did I feel like, okay, I'm in danger here. Like, never. I found the first time when we were doing the course, I found it to be it was very interesting and almost maybe, and this might be the wrong thing to say, but I'm going to say it anyways, a little bit exciting because it's like, oh, this is what she's talking about. Here it is. Okay, let's see how this all plays out. So that was like exciting. And then when it happened in another class, um, it was also interesting to like be in that situation and be like, okay, now I'm helping facilitate in somebody else's clearing. So in both cases, it was never like I feel like I'm personally like kind of to use a more mainstream idea, poltergeist, when like the little girl
Yeah.
is having all this dark energy and demons attaching to her and her family is like in danger and everyone around her. It did not feel that way at all, ever. But it was very interesting to be around that and to be a part of it. I
Yeah.
will say that.
Yeah. So it's partly energetically and spiritually set up for the safety. And I just want to say for those who are listening, no, this does not happen regularly. I try to set
Mhm.
it up intentionally so this doesn't happen in class, but sometimes it does. And it was very subdued and it was the way that it was handled was just to keep everything, under control, be able to
Mhm.
clear in a very quiet space. And it was like hard to explain, but manifested physically in the body where you can see that people don't have control of their physical body. And
Mhm.
so and I know people could hear a little bit because I'm speaking and I have to speak to it. And so you could hear me a little bit, but that was like, if you can hear anything, just pray, everything's great.
Yeah,
You
we're
understood
good.
because you came to class and were like, okay, I get what's happening here. Everybody else didn't even have any clue of what was going on.
Some people after the meditation were like, I didn't even hear
They
what was
didn't
going
know.
on over there. It was
And
wild. I was like, because
yeah,
I was hyper aware, and some people were like, no, I was on my own journey over here.
yeah. And typically, here's another example. Um, I have a lady that I worked with for many, many years, and she is going through some things. So she said she needed to come in for a session, just stress relief, relaxation, breath work, meditation, this thing, a little bit of energy clearing for emotional stress. And anyway, when she came in, she looked like she'd been going through it, and,
Yeah.
I was like, okay, whoa, I could see it on her. And she just looked like it was really, she's going through a lot. And so she comes in, and most of the time, now I always prepare physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, but I was not fully prepared for what was going to happen in this session because I worked with this person for years, never, any situation. I know she's going through a lot. So she comes in and I always have my notebook. She lays on the massage table. I cover her eyes, tuck her in and then I get my book. And before I even started the session, um, full on demonic I mean explosion. I mean, it went from 0 to 1,000 in 3 seconds. And it typically, like, I didn't even get to begin. And I was just very taken back because I just wasn't expecting that. And then it went into battle mode, right? For a good probably 75 minutes, a 90-minute session. Um, and we were able to get it cleared, but that was the most intense. Well, no, there was another one that kind of compares to that. But as far as almost looking like the jaw is dislocating from the face, where the face along, I mean, crazy stuff to where anyways, it's hard to explain, but it was bound where it was, so it couldn't move, but there was a lot of thrashing and moving and growling and snarling and other language kind of thing coming in. And it was in battle mode. So it can manifest in that way. And then sometimes I can come in and I've done a session where nothing violently shows up like this, but I'm able to do the session very calm, clear. And then I've had people after the session they vomit, they get sick because it is so deeply rooted in them that it comes out in that way. And then they literally look different. After the session, you can see a subtle difference in the way they look. So it's very difficult to say how it is exactly going to manifest because it's different from person to person.
Yeah.
That's some of my experiences. And I could go on and on and on and on.
I mean, I just feel
Just
like you
depends on.
probably have so many, and I've only been to a couple classes, or I've only seen it. Um, yeah. And I just remember in the one where we were talking about it, working on it in the rich course, I just remember with that person the heat in the physical body. I'll never forget how
Explain the
hot.
situation because from my perspective, I would love to talk about this because we're in a training session. I'm
Yeah,
teaching and building intuition. I'm explaining about energy healing. We're talking about the spiritual side
talking about
of
it.
things
Yeah.
and maybe go through the scenario and explain it from your perspective as being the
Okay.
spiritual side.
So from my perspective, okay, so I'll say this. There was, okay, so with you, including you, there was 7 people, and 6 of us were women. And there was this one gentleman in the class, and I had seen him in other meditation classes a couple of times. And the first day we kind of did the overview, and then the next day of everything that we were going to be working on, and it wasn't just 2 days of training. It was we're going to have more, but the first 2 days were in person, and then we did subsequent Zoom calls after that. But anyways, um, the second day we got together. We did some you did some teaching for a couple hours, and then you said, okay, this is what we're going to do. We're going to do energy work on each other, and we're going to split off, and we're going to do one-on-one. Everyone's going to have a partner, and then we're going to switch, around. So I get paired up with, and it just so happened, I think it worked out that everyone worked with the person next to them.
Mhm.
And so I was working with the gentleman, and I was like, oh, okay. And we were back to back. That's what it was. We were back to back, like, feeling energy. And
Mhm.
he was on fire, like fire. And it was like, close your eyes and just notice what comes to you.
Mhm.
And there was a couple things that came. And I remember one thing being, was a snake and, going like up the spine. And so afterwards we shared, but I couldn't get like how hot that fire was. It felt like rage. It felt like, for me, it felt like rage and addiction and all of these other things. That's what was coming through for me. And then the snake. And so we were talking afterwards, and comparing what did you get, what did I get, and so it was my turn to share with him, and I told him, and he was like, "Oh my God!" He's like, "Zenzi, did you hear what she said?" And you came over, and you're like, "No, what's going on?" And he was like, "She's talking about whatever situation that he was going through." I could feel it.
Mhm.
And then I didn't share with you, I didn't share with him at the time that with the heat that I was feeling, like the oppression of addiction and all of this other stuff. It felt like alcoholism and, that kind of addiction. And then we switched partners. And he went with another woman, and she was doing her thing, and then we were all done, and then it was time to share, and instantly.
So I just want to say, just for
Mhm.
clarity, the second half when you switched to the other session, that was actually instead of back to back, that was when you
Laying
were
down
starting to
and
work over the
working
physical
over the physical
body
body,
to,
right?
so we were just doing energy exchange in a slightly different way.
Different way,
Okay,
right?
got it.
And to be honest, I can remember thinking at the time, oh gosh, like, when he goes to the next person, I was a little nervous for the next person. I can remember thinking that, and like not vocalizing that, because I was like, we're taught to be polite. So now I'd be like, I'd probably say something to you. I'd probably pull you aside and be like, something is really going on here.
Mhm.
But so he went and started working with his next partner, and when we were going, she was giving him what came through, and he just kind of, I all of a sudden it was, we need to go outside, and we're all just sitting there, kind of chit-chatting with our partners, and we're like, what is going on? And then we hear like talking, and we're like, and everyone's just quiet because we don't know what's happening. And then you just came in, and you were like, okay, this is what's happened. Some stuff has come through. This is how it's manifesting. in order to keep everyone safe, I've sent him on a walk around the neighborhood. I think we had probably about an hour left.
Yeah.
And then you were like, I'm going to work with him afterwards because this has come up and we have to deal with it. But yeah, and kind of the same things that I was saying or that I was feeling is what his next partner was kind of vocalizing, and which he did not care for. So yeah, it was very, very interesting. And what was interesting, I have to say, looking back now after that, is that I don't think he ever got on because we did like 3 or 4 Zoom calls after that, like 3 or 4 Zoom
But
classes.
it's a month worth of training.
Yeah.
And I think he perhaps joined one,
I think maybe one. And he
maybe.
was like very apologetic and was like, no, you don't need to be apologetic. It was like good learning. It was fine.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I will say this too, is when we went to Sedona, I had kept thinking about him. Like I was like, oh, I gotta ask Zenzi about him. And then we were on that long hike and you were like, I just want to ask you something about your feelings on this. And I was like, oh my gosh. And you were like, he's reached out and he wants to do another side and all this stuff. And I was like, no, no, this does not feel good.
So
So it was,
I want to say real quick, going back to the experience, I want to plug back in there because I wanted to get your side because we never really got into it and explained it. But I want to say it from the other perspective so what happened external of the house and everything that
yeah,
was going on.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So interesting, when we were working with the partners, this is what I want to say that maybe I didn't share with you. You already started to open up the energy when he worked with you. So then when we worked with the next partner, because the energy, the chakra was already open, then it
Mhm.
was now we were working over each other and he didn't want her to touch. And we weren't touching. I mean, that we work above the physical body, we don't physically touch. And so
Mhm.
um as she's doing this, he started saying, don't do that. Like he started getting really intense with his words. And then she'd be like,
Yeah.
okay. And then she sat back and she would be writing. And then he went from being okay to when you talked about the fire, he just got
Mhm.
rageful and said
Mhm.
something. And then she waved her hand and she's like, can you come over? And I
Mhm.
came over and then they told me a little bit like, she's telling me this and he's saying that. And I was like, we're going to get up. We're going to go outside because everybody else is working here. And then we went out there and he walked off around the corner. And I said, he just walked, went outside. He walked around the corner, couldn't really see him, could hear something, but couldn't
Mhm.
really see. And she's saying, I didn't do anything. And I said, you're bringing light. We're doing healing work. We're talking about spirituality. What you're doing is flaring things up. You're not doing anything wrong, but we're not ready to deal with this right now. So I want you to go inside and find another group to work with. I don't want to discuss it. We'll discuss it later because we haven't gotten this far into the session yet, but we'll discuss it. And I really want you to invest in what you're doing. And that was super important. When I came in, I wanted you guys to be so invested in the present moment that you're not going to allow this to distract you from the work you're doing. Because what I'm teaching you is you can't be distracted from life and experiences if you're going to be 150% invested in the person in front of you. You can't worry about things that are going on. You can't be half in, half out. And so that was one huge lesson that came from it. And so I went back out and so when it walked back up, it was attack on me. And so
Mhm.
um, you know, just kind of a rage coming in over me. And then this close to my face, where I was like, I'm not going to back up, but I'm also not going to put my nose to your nose at this
Yeah.
time. So then, very rageful. So how did it manifest? Through rage, through aggression, through a bull like energy is how I want to explain it, like flaring through the nose, breath, just, and then I'm speaking like this, just like I'm speaking to you now, and there was no response. And then finally, I had to shift to a different kind of tone and different types of words to snap him out of it. And then he came back and I said, "Do you understand what's happening right now?" And he said, "No." I said, "Do you know what you just did?" And he said, "No." And I said, "You have no control of what just happened." He said, "No." And that's when I said, "We will deal with this, but I'm in the middle of teaching. We're not going to do this now." I said, "I'm going to get your things and I need you to go for a walk." And he said, "Well, I have things to do tonight." And I said, "That's too bad because I'm in the middle of working and this is not the appropriate time to deal with this, but this needs to be dealt with. And I need you to, we have an hour left and then, we'll figure out
Yeah.
what needs to be done after." And we were able to clear that. But sometimes people have awareness and sometimes they lose themselves. So if they're like, "Well, how do I know? How do I know if I am experiencing some oppression or attack of some kind?" You literally sometimes don't have awareness. You lose yourself in that, or
Mhm.
you don't have control. Like the gentleman I was working with yesterday, he kept making a very um, uncomfortable face. That's all I can say. I could feel it in my heart chakra and in my solar plex of like, um, didn't even look like his face. I can't even, it just met him, but I'm like, this is not normal. So it was manifesting through rage, through the looks. Sometimes people don't have awareness of that. So it can come in so many different ways for the people experiencing it. And
Yeah.
maybe in the next podcast, we can do like maybe a part two. I can share um, maybe one of a really big retreat that I did. And I typically don't do big, I try to have smaller groups, intentionally smaller groups. So it's more of an
Mhm.
intimate, personalized experience for everyone. Sometimes in the group retreat, I might, have 12, try not to have more than 12, 14 sometimes, but I try to keep the groups a little smaller just because of that. Um, but maybe we can go in and I can break down, a story of how I was affected. Because sometimes, even as the practitioner, how does this stuff get on you? And this is something we need to talk about for people. Maybe if you're listening and you're like, "Well, how do I protect myself from this?" Or
Yeah.
how do and maybe I don't do energy work, but I just want daily protection. What about
Because it's in
experience
your life. Like this type
everywhere?
of stuff is in our lives and we don't know how to define it, or we call it like, oh, that's their personality. That's not rage is
Sometimes,
not a
yes.
personality type.
Sometimes, yeah, it is a lot of deciphering. And if you're in the spirit, if you work in the spirit, you have more discernment. And I think discernment is super important. And you pray for that. And but we can get into this too on the next podcast. But because I would love to show you and explain a little bit of how, as a practitioner, even doing this for as long as I can, how this can come in and affect people. Because what I try to teach is, if you're not handling it correctly, it can
Yeah.
affect you as,
Yes.
as the teacher, as the healer. It can affect your home. It can affect your family. You don't want that. And so you really have to protect yourself and have awareness and know when to say, "Oh, this is maybe out of my wheelhouse of things that I want to work on." And
Mhm.
I want to say that too, because part of this work that I do and I was doing is really getting actually a lot more people coming in. And some they don't know. Most people come to me don't know what they're dealing with. I'm thinking, or they think I'm working on stress relief and relaxation, or I'm trying to do an energy clearing because I feel depressed, whatever the reason is.
Mhm.
And then, God takes us in a totally different direction. And I'm like, "Hey, this is a spiritual session and I'm going to, whatever you want me to do." But we also have to be prepared. So sometimes now I have like a warrior team who comes in and prays and goes to battle with me when necessary, because you do need that sometimes, especially all the time. But I think in certain situations with certain clients, you handle it differently depending on the
Mhm.
situation. And I've gone to preachers, I've gone to pastors of churches and said, "I know that this is different, and I'm not a priest." I said, "But this is what I do, and I'm called to do this, and this is what I believe." And I explain everything to them. And I've had them say, "I will pray, but I'm not going to get involved in demonic clearings." They don't want to have anything to do with it because they know that this is no joke And this is not something you want to take lightly. This is not something you want to ignore and, oh, this is just happening. No, this is very serious and can create and wreak havoc in your life and other people's lives, and especially your clients. So you really have to have knowledge on how to move forward for yourself. And I think every energy healer and practitioner needs to know. At least you need to
I
know.
think the general public just needs to know. Do you know what
Well,
I mean?
we started talking about this. I'm turning on, I don't have a ton of time to watch podcasts and stuff like this, but sometimes
Yeah.
when I'm able to watch certain things, I'm like, wow, they're talking on mainstream on somebody I don't even know the names, but like on mainstream, these big talk shows and these big people are talking about spirituality and demonic possession. And I'm thinking, wow, this is amazing that people are actually discussing this because it is around us. It is so important. There is a constant spiritual battle going on. And so
Hmm.
people need to have awareness of it big time. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Let's do another one. We're gonna
Okay,
do a
so we're gonna
follow-up.
build this part one and we'll do part two and see what other questions and things come up. So
Yeah.
anything else before we finish today? This was
No, I think that's, I mean, I'm excited for the next conversation.
awesome. Well, this was wonderful. Thank you guys for joining us, and we'll see you soon. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.